Hello everybody, this is video 22. Today we get to take a look at the sarcomere and the neuromuscular junction in action during a contraction through what's known as the sliding filament theory. This lecture is very difficult to do in a video lecture when I don't have the ability to draw or show some things, so I have provided a video link to a crash course video. If you fast forward to that crash course video, there is a section in it that talks about the sliding filament theory and how everything works diagrammatically for you to be able to reference as well. We're going to start on the neuron side of a neuromuscular junction. So what happens is you have some sort of impulse traveling from the brain down whatever series of nerves to the axon terminal of a neuron. And you'll remember that the axon terminal is what is attached to the neuromuscular junction. That's what's embedded into that sarcolemma. And inside the neuron, there are vesicles or sacs containing a neurotransmitter known as acetylcholine, which we abbreviate ACH. Those vesicles are going to mesh and bind with the cell membrane of that axon terminal to release acetylcholine, and it's going to travel across what's known as the synaptic cleft, which is just the space in between the axon terminal and the sarcolemma. So you can see here the synaptic cleft, that space here, and all the dots here representing acetylcholine that is traveling across that synaptic cleft from the axon terminal to the muscle fiber. Once that acetylcholine reaches the sarcolemma, there are acetylcholine receptors that are ready and waiting to bind to that acetylcholine. And once that bond occurs, it's going to send a signal, and it's going to allow sodium ions to begin flowing into the muscle fiber. Now, the important thing about these sodium ions are that they are positively charged. So what that does is those sodium ions are going to enter. You're going to get a local positively charged area of the cell membrane, which is going to stimulate other areas of that muscle fiber to also induce some sort of positive charge, and to induce those receptors to open and allow sodium ions to flow in. Once enough sodium ions have entered into that muscle fiber, you have a certain threshold, a certain charge threshold based on the number of sodium ions, that muscle fiber is going to be able to contract. Until it reaches that threshold, the muscle fiber will not contract. One thing to notice here is that we're talking about this at the muscle fiber level. So you can have one muscle fiber contract, and usually it's going to be in some sort of fascicular organization where a fascicle is going to contract at the same time, depending on the size of your motor unit. But at the muscle fiber level, you must reach a certain charge threshold before that muscle fiber contracts. We call this the all or none response. Basically, it either that muscle fiber completely contracts or does not respond at all. The sliding filament theory, here's that video, the crash course video. This goes beyond the sliding filament theory, but there is a section inside the video that does talk about it for you to be able to reference. So those sodium ions flow into the fiber. Once you reach that threshold, that's going to signal the release of calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Remember, that is the smooth ER version for muscle fibers. And calcium is going to be released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and it's going to bind to the troponin in the troponin-tropomyosin complex that was previously blocking actin and myosin from being able to bond one another because it was covering that bonding site on actin. Well, once those calcium ions bond to troponin, that protein is going to change shape, and it actually will open up the binding sites on actin, which is going to allow myosin to bond to actin. And when they do, they form what's called a cross bridge. From that cross bridge, myosin is then going to pull actin towards the midline, so it's going to shorten the sarcomere because it's pulling on that actin, which is anchored to that Z disc. It has the ability to do this because ATP is going to be spent to provide that energy, and when ATP gets spent, actually what happens is myosin changes shape from kind of an extended shape into a contracted shape, and that's what does the pulling of that actin. And this is how you get contraction of a muscle at the muscle fiber level. So if you have that muscle fiber contracts, that's going to provide tension to be able to shorten that muscle. When that muscle fiber is ready to relax, ATP is then going to replace the ADP molecule that is currently attached after being spent. That's going to allow myosin to release and be ready for the next contraction because it already has an ATP attached to it. As long as you have ATP, calcium, and a signal from the nervous system, you're going to have a contraction that will last forever. Obviously, we do not have contractions that are able to last forever. You cannot contract muscles forever because you have usually some due to fatigue in that muscle because you run out of ATP, or a signal from the nervous system that you no longer need that muscle fiber contracted. One example where contractions are maintained for a very long period of time is in rigor mortis. So what happens in rigor mortis is very soon after somebody passes away, the muscles will seize up because they are spending all of that ATP. All that ATP is basically breaking down because after you die, things start breaking down. So the muscles seize up, and then there's no new ATP being created to allow those muscles to relax. And so all your muscles end up seizing because all that ATP gets spent. Eventually, rigor mortis does not last a terribly long time. Eventually, the body does relax because other proteins begin to be broken down, making it unable to continue that contraction. So here we can see kind of how the charges work between muscle fibers and why those positive sodium charges are important. You can see here that the resting membrane potential is negative 90 millivolts. Basically, the difference between inside and outside the cell is negative 90 millivolts. You have some sort of stimulus that is going to have those sodium ions begin to flow in. You can see here the sodium gates open. Potassium gates are closed. We'll talk more about potassium gates when we get to the nervous system and action potentials. But when you reach a threshold, you're going to have a massive opening of those sodium channels. You're going to get a large influx of sodium that's going to move the cell all the way up nearly to plus 35 millivolts. And then as soon as the contraction is finished, those sodium channels close, potassium channels will open, which basically allows positive charges to move to the other side, and you start to get this return back to that normal membrane potential. You'll see a short period of hyperpolarization where too many potassium ions end up leaving, and then the cell has to spend some energy to get those to flow back to get back to that membrane potential. So as long as you have impulses sent by the brain, acetylcholine will continue to bind to those receptors. You'll continue to get a contraction. When the muscle is ready to relax, not only do you see that repolarization and hyperpolarization phase, but acetylcholine esterase is also going to break down acetylcholine from those acetylcholine receptors. Now you no longer have acetylcholine and those receptors telling sodium to enter the cell, and that muscle fiber is going to stop taking in sodium. All right, once again, this is a very abstract thought. It's very difficult to do when I don't have any sort of moving diagrams or anything like that. So make sure that you're asking any sorts of questions that you have. Make sure you watch that crash course video to be able to kind of visually see some of these things happen with people that have a lot more money to make cartoons like that.